Hi everyone, welcome to Ain't Life Great Vehicle Reviews. Today I've got my personal 1999 Land Rover Discovery 2. I bought it with about 92,000 miles on it. I've had it for 6 years. I've done a lot of Colorado trails, Moab trails in it, and now it's got close to 140,000 miles on it. So I'm going to do a 6-year owner's review. Let's hop in and let's take it for a spin. So when the Discovery 2 was made, they basically made it look like the Discovery 1, but 90% of the parts were new. They actually widened the track a little bit, lengthened the body of the vehicle, and they changed the rear suspension, gave it a Watts linkage over a multi-link, which gives you a little better highway ride. Purists don't like that as much for articulation, but it really gives it a nice highway ride. And they also added the traction control, which was a little bit controversial at first, but it served me really well. I originally bought this thinking I was going to put lockers on it front and rear, and then once I wheeled it, I thought, you know what, maybe the True Track limited slips is the way to go. And then I continued to wheel it and realized that, you know what, the traction control for what I do is pretty good. They got rid of the center diff lock, which was the biggest issue with this vehicle, but because the Discovery 1 was built alongside the Discovery 2, they actually put the transfer case in with the center diff lock, wired up the buttons on the dash. You just had no way of shifting it. So a popular modification is installing a Discovery 1 gear shift to get you that center diff lock back. Okay, we're going to engage the center differential lock, and then you will see on the dashboard see, the lights even work. And once you have the center differential lock with the traction control, it's a very formidable package for off-roading. Land Rover heard the complaints of the enthusiasts, and in 2004 they added the center differential lock as part of the factory package. So this vehicle has spent its years on the top 10 worst list of American vehicles, and it nearly sunk Land Rover as an American company, due primarily to the engine. And I'm going to do a buyer's guide video after this, so take a look at that for more information on the engine. And there's some things that enthusiasts have figured out to improve the reliability. For me, I have never had a failure on the trail, knock on British teak, and it's really never left me stranded. I wheel it heavily. Off-road, it's been very reliable for me. Now that doesn't mean it's been maintenance free. There's a lot of stuff that you need to do to keep up on it, to keep it in that shape, and we'll throw that in the buyer's guide video. A lot of off-roaders in America come from a Jeep background. I came from a Jeep background, and I owned a couple Grand Cherokees. My parents had some TJ Wranglers, and I grew up on a CJ. And the best way to describe the Discovery 2 is that on the highway, it drives like a Grand Cherokee, like a ZJ or a WJ. Very nice ride, tracks well, very comfortable. Off-road, because of the 100-inch wheelbase, it wheels more like a Jeep TJ Wrangler. Well, a Jeep TJ Wrangler with a big extension on the back. You got to worry about that overhang.
You're stuck.
Thanks, Dad! But other than that, it's very maneuverable off-road and very comfortable to drive. Now I've got a 2.5-inch Old Man Emu heavy-duty lift on it. I have 32-inch tires, a Tactical Rover or Tactical 4x4 front bumper with the Quadratec winch, and Rocky Road sliders. And I thought I'd have to put a rear bumper on here, but luckily the shape of the rear hitch acts as a really good skid plate, and I haven't had any problems with my overhang. You sit upright, the seat won't lower very far, and you want to look and you'll hit the headliner here because they put these map pockets up top. And so you're kind of hunched down to see the road. When you're off-road, that's not a big deal because you're looking up close. But highway driving, you can get a little fatigue from that. I wish this seat would be a little bit lower so that I could sit out straight. The cab in the interior, this is back with the old traditional British design. It's very cramped, it's very tight. I mean, if I'm putting my arm, I'm sitting it right here on the window, which is actually quite comfortable, although it kind of wears the interior off right there. I've got a nice armrest here, but the seat is not very wide. It just isn't, and that's how it is in the passenger seat. We'll show the rear compartment later. Now I'm up to highway speed now, and being an old vehicle, I've got some wind noise through the seals of the sunroofs. I've got some rattling, particularly in the glove box up front. I got to figure out how to fix that. And I got some whine from my tires. I've got Cooper ATPs, which once they wear, they start to get a little noisy. But other than that, the drive is very, very comfortable. There's the interior dashboard. The interior is very nicely designed. The buttons are big for the glove test. Radio, climate control, hill descent control, emergency flashers, gas. There's my ultra gauge. Four-wheel drive control. Glove box. Very nice. I like having the shelf there compared to newer vehicles that have the nice curvy interiors. You can't really set stuff on here. Maybe they do that for safety, but it's nice to put your GPS, cameras, things like that up there. Now the back hatch, what I really like for such a small vehicle with a 100-inch wheelbase is, notice up here, we remove that cargo bin and we have my Wolfpack boxes, my ammo cans, ammo crates, and my fridge. And all of this fits with a ton of room available for adding other stuff. Compare that to my videos I've done with the WK2 Grand Cherokee or the Hummer H3. And so when I'm going, unless I have more stuff, I put the dust shield over it and I can house everything. Now, 12-volt power to the fridge back here is keyed, and so I'd have to do some modifications in the fuse box to make the fridge have power 24/7, but for my day trips this is just fine. Now in the rear we have stadium seating, and so the rear seat is higher than the front seat, and what that means is when you get in, even though there's not a whole lot of leg room, you have just a lot of headroom. You can see over the driver. Okay, we're going to shift into four-wheel drive low, putting it in neutral. Push this forward. You'll see transfer case alarm, and then into four low. One of the best things about the Discovery is it takes the transfer case from the Land Rover Defender. So what you have is what is the LT230 transfer case. It's helical geared, heavy duty, and it actually has a 1.2 to 1 reduction ratio in high range. So you actually get some gear reduction in high range, and low range is 3.2 to 1. So it's not quite as low as a Rubicon Rock Track, which is 4 to 1, but it's a lot lower than most transfer cases, which means even though I have a high gear ratio in my front and rear axles, I've got really low range in 4 low. Now with the lift on the highway, I don't have a lot of power. A lot of people throw in 410s to gain some of that power back. I haven't done it yet. Another thing I like about the Discovery 2 is this was back when Land Rover still had function over design. And so I am sitting up high off-road now. I can see over the front hood almost as well as I could in the Jeep TJ. And then these doors are low, so in a pinch, I can lower the window and look outside and I can see my wheel track. Now with the OME 2.5-inch lift, you're stuck with, I believe, 265/75 R16 wheels, which is about 32 inches. Now there are other lifts which can get you higher, but I didn't want to mess with my drive shafts, and I find even with 32-inch tires, this vehicle performs very well for what I want to do. I've got a 4-liter aluminum block V8. It's a Buick block that Rover bought back in the day. So this is the last version of that Buick block V8 with a Bosch fuel injection system. The horsepower and the torque curve is very similar to the Jeep straight 6, 4-liter straight 6. And that's not a bad thing. I've mentioned in my TJ review that that's one of my favorite engines. This V8 is probably a little bit smoother. It's kind of imperceptible. I really like it. I would put it higher than the Jeep 4-liter if it was a little more reliable, and we'll get into that in the other video. I've got a lot of control off-road when I'm rock crawling. I can add torque when I need to. The downside is, in a lot of these early 2000 motors, is I'm horsepower limited. If you're doing a lot of sand or mud bogging, that's going to become an issue. And also on the highway, I can comfortably get this vehicle up to 80 miles an hour, believe it or not, and it drives very comfortably on the highway compared to, say, the TJ Rubicon we were test driving just a while back. But you want to pass somebody on the highway, and no, make sure you've got 2-3 miles ahead of you. It's just not a speed demon as far as that's concerned, but very nice flat torque curve in 4-low. I've never wanted for power when I'm doing any rock crawling or off-highway driving. Again, what makes the Land Rover Discovery 2 unique versus modern 4-wheel drives or even contemporary 4-wheel drives is I have a short 100-inch wheelbase. I mean, it's closer to the Jeep TJ in wheelbase width than it is a 4-door Jeep JK by a long shot. So this 100-inch wheelbase gives us a nice footprint off-highway, but it is very nimble. But at the same time, I can sit 3 comfortably in the back. And if you had the SE7 model, where I have the storage bins, there are jump seats. So this is actually a 7-seat vehicle with a 100-inch wheelbase. And I'm not aware of any other vehicle save the Land Rover Discovery 1 which does that. Some of the downsides to this vehicle is the braking. You're on the highway and a deer or something jumps out and you slam on the brakes, it doesn't really grip. My wife and I like to say the braking is lazy. It just kind of slowly gets you there. So another negative of these brakes, being what they are, is if I'm going uphill on an obstacle and say I take the wrong line and I need to back up to get another go at it, when I put this in reverse on that incline with that 3.2-to-1 gear reduction in low range, you can actually slide back, especially if it's loose. And this happened to me once on a hill. You will actually slide down the hill out of control because the reverse torque is greater than your braking capacity. And I was pushing on those brakes, mashing them, but I was still sliding down that loose hill. And so when I'm on a loose incline or a steep incline, even with rock, I put it in neutral and just use the brakes to control my descent rather than putting it in reverse. Let's talk about the negatives of this vehicle. Honestly, the biggest negative of this vehicle is the required maintenance. And it's not that big a deal, especially if you're a gearhead and you like maintaining your vehicles. It's really not that hard. Finding a good one that's been well kept nowadays is going to be the hardest, so you don't have to deal with head gaskets, things like that. But the maintenance, pretty much, once you get it all sorted out, is you're changing the oil and greasing your joints, and you're good to go. There's always that risk that a liner will slip on your motor, and that's probably the biggest negative. Horsepower is an issue. If you're driving down the highway cruising and then you want to pass somebody, I usually don't. I just follow the slowest guy. Gas mileage, it's not very good on gas, obviously, with the lift kit. Most four-wheel drives aren't. So the positives, I've got a gross vehicle weight rating of just over 6,000 pounds on this vehicle. I've got cargo capacity. I've got room to put my gear. I've got room to put my family. I've got a narrow wheelbase so I can be maneuverable on the trail. I've got the classic Camel Trophy looks. I've got traction control, which honestly works very well if you have the center diff lock. I have the center diff lock. I've got full-time four-wheel drive. I've got this nice spacious interior with lots of glass. My viewing angles are very good. With that tactical 4x4 front bumper, I've got really good approach angle, and I've got decent ground clearance. And this vehicle is just awesome. On the trail, it is a classic overland vehicle. Where do you place this in the pecking order? Well, when I bought this, I was looking for 80 series Land Cruisers, and you're looking at $8,000, $9,000, $12,000 around here to get an 80 series Land Cruiser with over 200,000 miles on it. I was able to get this, and I overpaid with full records for $5,000 6-7 years ago, and it had 90,000 miles on it. So it can be the budget version of a Land Cruiser as long as you hit the maintenance items that you need to right off the bat. And again, I've got the buyer's guide video. If you're really interested in picking up a Land Rover Discovery 2, check that one out. I'll tell you what to look for and what to do to maximize your reliability if you decide to purchase one and join the Land Rover group. Last time I checked, our local classifieds in Utah, you're looking at around $2,000 and under for one that has major issues. And then you have people asking $7,000 to $8,000 for super nice ones, and then you're still in around the $5,000 range for decent versions. So if you had a budget and you were looking to fit a family of 5 and you wanted a 4-door JK Wrangler, you're still looking at $10,000. So you can take $5,000 of that and put it into maintenance of this vehicle or pay for gas for your trips. So this really makes it a budget-minded overland choice nowadays. And because of that, it only being $5,000, you might take a little more risks with it on trails. You might take it on harder trails because you're not worried if you're hitting the body panels or hitting the rear bumper, because it's not as expensive as a brand new 4Runner. So I would recommend it. I've enjoyed owning it. It's still fun to drive on road, fun to drive off road, and it's a good vehicle.